All right, guys, this is how you paint a faux brick wall for your graffiti lesson. So I'm wearing gloves and I have a smaller piece of paper. You will not have gloves and you will have a larger piece of paper. Basically, we're stamping this with a sponge and some paint. And so what I need for you to be aware of is when you do this, there's not really a pattern, but you need to be careful that you stagger your brick, okay? And I'll show you how to do that. Also, you're going to need to leave mortar lines. The mortar is that stuff they put in between the bricks. It's kind of cements it in place. So the first thing you're going to do when you get your sponge is when you pick it up, turn it over and make sure that there is paint pretty much all over, and you can see there is actually a lot of paint right there. So I am going to try to get rid of some of that. Okay, this is very messy, so we're going to have to be really careful. Don't wipe this on your clothes. So when you pick it up, you are going to start in the corner of your paper and just press. Okay, and you can see I can just gently press that. When you pick it up, you're going to go in a row. I want you to leave a gap in between where you pressed it the first time and where you're pressing it the second time. So you're leaving a gap. That is your mortar line, your fake mortar line. And the mortar is actually going to be the white color of this paper. So you can see right here I only have a tiny portion, but I'm still going to stamp that. And remember, you're leaving a gap in between each one. And I'm stamping that in place, and it's okay if it went off the paper. That's okay. Okay, so I also, in addition to leaving the mortar lines in between, I also need to leave it underneath. So when I do my next row, and by the way, did you notice I did not go back and get any more paint? That was enough paint in there to stamp quite a few bricks. So on this next one, I do not want to put it right underneath again. I want to stagger the pattern. So I'm going to let it be half off the paper and half on. And staggered just means they're not in rows exactly like they were above it. So this one, I want it to be offset a little bit. So I am stamping that, and I can see now I'm kind of running out of paint. So now would be a good time to go back and get more. And do you see how I left a gap above? All right, so you want to leave a gap in between vertically, and you want to leave gaps in between horizontally. So I'm just going to keep going, and again I've got my gap to the side right here, so that this pattern is not bumped right up next to another pattern, and it makes it look like we have a grout line in between, or a mortar line in between. Okay, so now on this third row, I'm going to go back and do it the way that I did on the top row, where I have a whole brick to begin with, and then keep going this way. So you just want to make sure that every other row is a staggered pattern, meaning that the bricks kind of shift a little bit so that they're not completely lined up, and that you can see that one turned out super light. So I'm going to go back. If that turns out super light, just go back and get a little bit more on your sponge and press it again. There we go. Okay, so again, mortar lines vertically, mortar lines horizontally, and that's just you not stamping anything right there, so it leaves gaps in between your brick. And remember, staggered pattern, so that the first and second rows do not line up with one another. Okay, we don't want one long row of grout lines. We want it to be short. Those vertical grout lines to be short. I hope this all makes sense, and I will give you a wipe when you're done, and obviously these will go on the drying rack.